Welcome to Embedded. I'm Alicia White, alongside Christopher White. Have you ever wondered, what do electrons sound like? Well, I'm happy to have Helen Leigh back to answer that question and give you some ideas for some projects.
Hi, Helen. Thanks for coming back.
Hi, nice to be back.
You've been on the show before, and at the time you were writing the Crafty Kid's DIY Guide to Electronics.
Correct.
But there was a lot more. You'd written many books before that, and now you've done many things after that. So could you tell us about yourself?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Helen Leigh, which is how you'll find me on Twitter and GitHub and Instagram and all those things as well. Until recently, my main thing was I made things and I wrote about them. So mainly musical instruments or things using electronics that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be using electronics, things like massive plushy tentacles or big embroidery pieces that are also electronic analog synths. So I guess those all fall under experimental musical instruments, and I would write about them for Make magazine, for whom I write a column every issue, and various other things as well. So yeah, writing, making experimental musical instruments. I would also teach. I would lecture on DIY music tech and electronics in general. But now I've just taken a job at CrowdSupply, where I'm going to be head of community. And I'm very excited about what that's going to bring to my life as well. So,
okay. Questions about all of that, including the musical tentacle. Don't think I let that go by.
That's not even my weirdest make of recent times.
But we're going to do lightning round first. You ready?
Yes, lightning rounds. Yes, I am ready.
Weirdest thing you have ever made a musical instrument out of?
Oh, wow. The strangest thing, probably myself. I guess that's not that strange. You know, something I made recently that everybody really quite enjoyed is I made a theremin out of a golden disco ball, which I also made.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Favorite sensor?
Ooh. There's so many good ones. Okay, so my favorite one that I work with a lot. So I work with capacitive touch a lot, which marries really well with instruments. And I've been in love with this capacitive touch sensor, which for me has replaced the MPR 121. And it's called Trill, and they're by an open hardware company in London called Bella. It's got 30 channels. It's so good. I love it.
What is the best podcast to listen to while on your honeymoon?
Well, actually, listen.
Ask this of both of them every time.
Well, we actually did. So, as some of your listeners might know, or maybe not, I'm married to Drew Festini, who's a PDP-7, who is the purplest Osh Park employee of all time, and does lots of open source stuff as well. But yeah, we on our honeymoon we did listen to Embedded FM as well as the Amp Hour. So nicely distributed amongst the embedded podcasts. But yes, I mean, I don't want to play favorites. Sorry, Chris, but I do prefer listening to Alicia on my travels.
Favorite professionally made musical instrument?
Oh, well, I'm very fond of my cheap plastic Danelectro guitar.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah, they're so fun. I also have a less cheap and still but wonderful Moog Sub 37, which is the prize of my synth collection. So yeah, I do like the banjo as well, though, although it can be creepy. I don't know. Also wistful.
Favorite dev board or microcontroller kit?
Oh, gosh, how long have you got? So I have emotional connections to obviously the Arduino Uno, from like the way that it led my journey into hardware back in the day. Well, actually, no, my first microcontroller was the Intel Galileo, which was terrible. But the one I got after that was the Uno, and it's very nostalgic for me. I would say that the board I use the most is the Bella board, which I use to make which is based on a Beagle board, and I use it to make embedded instruments. So it's just a real good workhorse. What else? I've been really enjoying all the Teensies, of course. Especially the new one. It's just ridiculously fast,
and it's super tiny, isn't it?
It's super tiny. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the Teensy, and it's Portland based, which is where I've just moved to. So repping my new adopted town by saying Teensy. So yeah, is that enough, or can I go for an entire hour about telling you about my favorite microcontrollers and why I like them?
Well, maybe insert them organically as the conversation.
Okay.
Best way to motivate yourself for a day of writing?
Do you know what? I actually really hate writing.
This is why I'm asking you, because I hate everything right now, and I want you to tell me how to do anything.
I hate writing, even though it's how I've made my living for the best part of a decade. I'm a good writer, unfortunately. I just don't particularly like it. The best way to hype myself up is to procrastinate wildly until I hate myself so much that I have no option.
Oh, no, I already do that, Helen. I need a new idea.
I don't know what to tell you. Actually, I do. I wrote Crafty Kids. The only way I could get myself motivated for Crafty Kids, apart from the procrastination and the tears of frustration, was to basically just drink ridiculous amounts of both a Club Mate and then vodka Club Mate.
Jesus.
Yeah, Club Mate is a beautiful thing, and I miss it dearly. I don't know how I'm going to finish this next book without Club Mate.
If you could teach a college course, what would you want to teach?
I've taught many college courses, or university courses as they call them on my side of the pond. My favorite one I've ever taught has got to be, it was actually quite sad that I had to give this up to come to the US. I teach a master's module on a music production course. And I teach, my module is about music tech hacking. And the reason I really like this one is because I get to teach people who've never touched code or hardware ever before in their lives. These are like professional music producers, right? Or sometimes performers themselves. And I do a 2-week intensive course. I teach them how to code. I teach them how to make circuits. I teach them how to make noises with those circuits. And then their deliverable at the end of the course is to make me an instrument. And then I mark their instrument. So that's my favorite experience. I love teaching non-coders how to use technology as a tool. It's super rewarding, and they often come up with much better inventions than somebody who knows what they're doing does. In my opinion, anyway.
But they don't know what they don't know or how it's supposed to work.
Quite. There's that great quote from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, which is, because we weren't experts, we didn't know what we weren't capable of doing. And that's a quote I live my life by. And my unending ignorance of all sorts of technologies does not stop me from using them and making a mess. Sometimes those messes are lovely, though. So, I think it works.
How did the Crafty Kids Guide to DIY Electronics do? I mean, you motivate yourself through shame, which I don't find motivating, but I know that is Chris's method.
Wow. Don't knock
I feel you, Chris. I feel you. How did it go afterwards?
I mean, when we talked to you, it was just releasing, so,
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. It went reasonably well. I mean, DIY electronic project books are not going to become the next Harry Potter, are they? But it sold as expected. And it was widely well received. I got some fantastic reviews for it. I think it was one of the first, or maybe the first. Anyway, one of the reasons I wrote it was because I was teaching a lot of electronics at the time to not just I didn't just teach undergrads and postgrads. I also really enjoyed teaching workshops, generally on a voluntary basis on in hackerspaces or at festivals, I would teach a lot of families how to use like basic electronics or basic microcontrollers, just because I think it's a really nice thing to do. And I was looking through all the different resources, and I saw that there were no electronics books that were, like female coded. So I wanted to make one that was written for little girls and with little girls. In fact, I had an advisory board of, I think there were 259 to 7 to 10-year-old girls on my advisory board who chose every single project. So really, the way that I know that I had an impact on those people, which was really nice. My favorite thing about that book is I found out completely by accident at a meeting that the book was being used in a refugee center across refugee centers in a couple of different places in Berlin to teach basic electronics to recent refugee kids, which made me cry in a meeting. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So that was lovely. I mean, I get a lot of people who contact me about that book. I guess that was 2 years ago. No, really? 2 years ago, maybe? I don't know. Something like that.
September 2018 was when we last recorded. So yeah,
2 years ago. It's still out there. It's still doing its thing. I am quite proud of it. Actually,
I am quite. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of these projects that I still want to do. I mean, I know, as we were saying, I know how they're supposed to work, but this looks like so much more fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be fun. I didn't want to write a textbook. I wanted to write a fun project book that teaches electronics through craft. That's all. And, I think a lot of people get so worthy about books for children. They've got to be this, that, and they've got to hit these curricular points. But, I think I've done enough formal education in my, I've taught in enough formal education situations to understand that the best learning sometimes just happens because you're doing something fun. And it's more important to do the fun prompt than it is to make sure that it's extremely rigorous. Because if that child is then interested in that, then there's, we have the internet now, so they can go and look it up.
One of the projects you were working on around that time that wasn't in the book was your collaboration with Emojin Heap.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Sure. So it's such a weird story, actually. I have no idea how they let me do this. But the Emojin Heap team, because it's not just Emojin Heap, there's a bunch of people who work for her and with her. There's one of her teams that does this thing called the mini.mu glove. And the mini.mu glove is this wonderful piece of technology, which they're gesture sensing gloves that are used to control a DAW, a digital audio workstation. So, like Ableton or whatever. So Imogen was really frustrated about, she didn't want to spend her life behind a keyboard. She's very hot on music production, but she didn't want to perform in front of a laptop, right? So she worked with a team of technologists to create this gesture control, these gloves that would she'd be able to make these gestures on stage, and it would be able to trigger sound effects, different loops, or whatever. Anyway, it was this really cool piece of tech which I had literally nothing to do with. I just saw them on YouTube being used by what's her name? The pop star, Ariana Grande. Yeah. So I saw them being used on an Ariana Grande arena tour. And I just thought, oof, that would be an amazing hook to get some teen girls into doing some embedded stuff. So I messaged Emojin Heap through a music connection. And said, hey, can I make a children's version of this? Would you mind if I ripped it off? Not as a product, I meant more to do it in a workshop. And she was super into the idea, so much so that she actually got me to make a prototype of what that would look like as an actual product. So I did that. I made that for her. And just as an example, as a prototype for a product launch that she was doing. And everybody loved it so much that we turned it into a product in collaboration with P. Maroney. who are the British Adafruit, essentially. But yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic experience for me. One that I really shouldn't have been able to land, because I'm not a product designer at all. I've done some of my own products before that, but they were very much DIY stuff, right? It was like HackSpace kits. Do you know what I mean? Like DIY synth, or like how to make an electric guitar, or like I did a kit that was gesture controlled robot unicorn, but they were all very much, yeah, for reals. But they were all very much like I'd laser cut the outer, and then I'd put some like servos in a box, and it would all be pretty terrible. I was not very good kitter. I was good at coming up with the ideas, but in terms of the actual logistics and distribution, I was like, meh, meh. I hate doing this. I hate doing this, and I will no longer do this. But yeah, so this mini.mu project gave me this opportunity to take my understanding of like product from like a maker point of view, and actually see what that looks like when it goes to actual production. It was really cool. I learned a lot from working on the mini.mu glove, and it was really cool of Emojin just to trust me and to take the lead on creating that product from the beginning to right at the end. It was really fun, actually. And it was such a buzz to see it for sale all over the world. They had them in like micro centers, and like, they were on Adafruit, and people in Japan have made them, and it's my hand on the box, which is really funny. So I am a hand model. Have you ever had a hand model on an embedded FM before?
No, this is, well, I guess this is the second time.
Oh, that's true.
Oh yeah, that is true, actually.
It is really gratifying to see. I've only had that experience a couple of times, seeing something you worked on exists, out in the world, and walk into a store and I kind of did that. That's
yeah, it's amazing. I've never seen one of the people have sent me pictures of my things in a store, but I've never witnessed myself something that I've made in a store. So sad times.
Well, you still might. I mean, Portland has enough tech. When the stores open up, you might get to find one.
That's true, perhaps. Yeah. and I'm not done yet. I'm not going to just like lie down and die after this interview.
And we won't be using that for a title. Tempted as I am.
This is it. This is the pinnacle of my career and my life. It's like, there is only death for me now. You see, this is what happens in pandemics when you don't speak to people for a long time and you start saying things that are not societally acceptable. My apologies.
No problem. It is weird how we just kind of go from happy normal to the lows.
Look, I'm British. We have a gallows sense of humor anyway.
That's true. It's a good excuse.
Yeah, that's definitely a good excuse.
Are you still working with Emojin Heap?
I actually just got an email from her the other day, which I need to reply to. We have done. So the mini.mu in this summer just gone. We gave them out to Red Hat, I think, paid for it. But we gave them out to like 4,000 kids in the UK as part of like a tech summer camp. And I'm hoping that we're gonna do that again next year. I need to do some work around making that happen, I think. But yeah, so we're talking about that, and she's launching some kind of blockchain thing, I think, which she's invited me to. So I'm going to have a little look at that. Although I don't particularly care about blockchain, so don't know.
One of the threads through your career has been music and tech.
Correct.
And you are going to tie all of those up into a book?
Yes, that's correct, which I still need to finish, but I'm a good chunk of the way through. I'm doing a new book on DIY music technologies. There will probably be a slightly snappier title, but that will come. And it's a project book, again, of all sorts of experimental music things, from microcontroller-based makes to analog makes to found sound. So I take you through all my favorite ways to make to make noises, essentially, and to experiment with sound. But also, I'm fairly astonished that they've agreed to my project plan list. I mean, normally in DIY music tech, you might expect some simple Arduino, maybe some Arduino theremins and some DIY guitars and, some ordinary things. But my editors let me get away with some incredibly strange makes, which I'm quite grateful for. So I've done stuff like I've done a tentacle that wraps around wraps around my torso, for the full length of my torso. It gives me a hug, and then it's like a giant plushy tentacle, with headphones coming out of it, and you cuddle it up, and its limbs like wrap around your waist, and then you stroke it. You lay your head on it like a pillow, and you stroke it and squeeze it. And when you stroke it, it purrs. It's got this really comforting bassy purr. And they let me put that in the book, which was quite nice. And then also, and this is quite a fun thing about them, I did a one particular make, which was jelly bongos, like made of jello. And I'm pretty sure it's the only technology book that I've come across that includes a recipe.
Is it regular jello, or did you go ahead and make jello shots for this?
I went ahead and jello. I mean, come on, like, I'm not American. Jello's like that. It's firm fruit dessert, correct? Jello.
Okay,
yes.
So there's jam
it's
jelly.
Like waddly. Jelly is, in America, the jelly is like the stuff you spread on toast, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean the jello, and the stuff you put in a mold.
Yes.
Right? And it would wobble on a plate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so jello then.
But do you know you can put vodka in it and make jello shots?
Girl, of course I know that.
And so your bongos.
Yeah, but then if you put jello, and if you put vodka in the jello bongos, they would be too sloppy. And probably
then there's
so
always
would I.
the fire aspect.
The fire aspect. I mean, I've never tried to set fire to vodka jelly.
I don't think that's going to work.
I think it's not going to work. Yeah, I mean, unless you're using some extra materials there. If you got a flamethrower on it, I mean, it's probably going to burn, isn't it?
Most things do.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't bet on the jello versus a flamethrower, but I might bet on the jello versus a match. So I guess it depends on how one is burning it.
That requires the Makey kit. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah. So that's I did a chapter on, or a short chapter on, lots of different Makey makes. I mean, it's kind of it's one of the older microcontrollers, I guess, now, but it's got a niche, and it does really well in that niche, And I often break out the Makey in situations where people might be intimidated by code. It's a very quick win, and you can get super creative with it. And they do all sorts of wonderful things. And it's like really nicely supported with resources for teachers and so on. So you're not going to use the Makey for that many different applications, but for its specific applications, it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, it's a great teacher-friendly little board. Big up.
Now they have a $20 version.
Oh yes, they do.
I guess
the
now
Go or something, isn't it?
Best Tech Toys of 2014.
So, yeah.
Maybe not exactly now, but the USB version, you don't have to. It goes into your computer, and that's where your sound comes out.
Yeah, that's right. Same with the board as well. I mean, it's not an embedded, it's a controller, like it converts whatever it basically converts anything into a keyboard. It's a lovely little board for entry level music making. That's for sure.
Why is music part of it for you? I mean, for me, blinking lights are kind of irritating. Sound is kind of irritating. But once you got me to motors, I was just, okay, this is it. But
interesting.
You focus more on the sound. What drew you to that?
Well, music was part of my life before tech was, actually. So I can't believe I'm about to admit this in public, but when I was a young lass, I was in a choir. I was in the Church of Wales choir. I'm from Wales, so I was in this high Church of Wales choir, and used to go 3 times a week, singing practice. And I had like a white ruff and a burgundy cassock. Like I did the whole like high church situation, and I got medals for singing and, all that kind of stuff. And I also played a bunch of instruments as well. So I guess music for me was part of my childhood. I've always been really interested in the experimental side of things. I remember even at school, like, and I went to a really terrible comprehensive school, I don't know what that tracks to in US culture, but like just quite a bad school. I went to quite a bad school, really quite rough. And in year 7, which is your first year, I got on stage in a general assembly and I played several instruments that I'd made, which were all very experimental. And my music teacher was sat at the front, like, yes, nodding away like it was amazing jazz. And like every single other person in the school was like, wow. So I got horribly bullied after that. but yeah, it took me like, it was little nerd. You can imagine little nerdy Helen at the front. I was a very innocent little kid, like playing all these instruments that I'd made myself in front of an absolutely horrified assembly of 1,000 children, like doing the least cool thing possible. So yeah, I mean, making weird noises has been something I've been doing for quite a long time. I guess people just are laughing a bit less at me now for doing it. But I laugh at myself, so that's okay.
You tell that story like it was a scar on your past, but you do realize that you were creating lots of little modern Helens with your work, right? I mean, are you just trying to find a crowd to hide in, or was that really not that bad of an experience and you really do want to share it with everyone you've ever met?
Well, that was just I don't think it was that bad an experience, and I certainly wasn't scarred by it. I took pride in being a little bit different, and I still do. So, no, I think it's just a funny story for me. Just thinking like, wow, even at 11 years old, I was already making strange instruments, with all sorts of junk that I found around. But it took me it took me a while to come to music technology. I guess the first instrument. Well, actually, no. The first DIY kit I made, like at my little HackSpace in London, was the first 2. In fact, were both instruments. And I would say maybe like between 60 and 70% of all of my output throughout my kind of like maker life has been music based. It's not entirely music based, but it's just, I'm also super into music full stop, not just the tech side of things. And I'm also like a massive computer history and general history nerd. So I kind of see myself as part of this long line of music experimenters, and I draw a lot of inspiration from the past weirdos who were making strange noises, and I draw a lot of inspiration from like the early tech days as well. Just that kind of like spirit of adventure and fun and slight anarchy, and yeah, not always knowing exactly what's going to happen. I think it's quite a fun way to experiment with technology, and I think music lends itself to that, which is probably why I lean towards it a little more.
That seems like a good lead in to asking you about Kraakdos.
Kraakdos. Oh, yeah. Crackle boxes. Yeah. Kraakdos is a Dutch crackle box. So there's this, I've forgotten the guy's name, but there was this dude in the 60s who was like super into kind of music circuit bending, if you will. Like back in the old days when you had like radios with like exposed through hole components, you could just like lick your fingers and like and like touch up the PCB basically, and it would start making strange noises. So this Dutch guy was like used to really love doing that with his dad's radios, and then started doing that but with some electronic components, and made these like kind of, I guess, noisemaker boxes. So it's analog sound, but it's what you call a noisemaker rather than like a more traditional instrument, in that it makes bleeps and bloops and scratches and crackles and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's part of like an experimental instrument tradition, which is pretty strong. And I guess you're asking me this because I made a Crackle Box recently. I made a fully embroidered Crackle Box. So yeah,
embroidered.
which is completely embroidered. So all of the traces on the PCB. There was no PCB. It was an embroidery hoop filled with felt, and all of the traces, all of the wiring was done by me by hand using silver thread. I did not embroider the chip, however. It's based on an LM386 chip, and like some, capacitors and blah blah blah. But yeah, they were all sewn on. The board, as it were, was hand embroidered.
And so it was almost all soft.
Yes.
Really cool.
And
yeah, I made a soft speaker as well, but it sounded terrible, so I didn't put that in the book. You can make an embroidered speaker. I mean, I'm sure there are people who've had better. So you can basically like make this big spiral out of embroidered thread, and then you put a magnet on it, and it will make sound. But I've not yet managed to create one that's good enough to share.
The LM386 is an amplifier chip, right?
Indeed, it is. Yes.
So how does it make noise?
So the way that you do it is that so there's like, it's a very simple circuit actually to make this little Crackle Box. It's an LM386, and then you've got like one ceramic capacitor. I used a 106, I think, and then one electrolytic capacitor. And those are the only three hard components on the whole board.
Wow. Okay.
And then, yeah, which is crazy, right? And then like all of the other legs on the chip are broken out to these long traces, right? Around the PCB, or around, in my case, around an embroidery hoop. And basically what you're doing is, by making and breaking the connections between those legs, you're generating an electric signal, which varies depending on the resistance of your body. So, for example, you can get a different note, like it will create a different signal, a different noise, like a different frequency, based if you lick your fingers, or depending on who you are. So it's essentially using the resistance of your own. You are a variable resistor that is creating an electrical signal that the LM386 then converts into sound.
is it like different fingers sound different, or is it just, the resistance of Elysia is this?
Well, that depends, right? Because the resistance of Alicia might depend on like how much tea you've drunk that day, or how far up a mountain you are, or like, how close to Chris you're standing. But yeah, different people do tend to have different sounds to them.
Interesting.
I've done a few different analog projects that rely on the natural resistance of a human. I did a really nice one with Phoenix Perry. She's a really good friend of mine. And her and I did a high five synthesizer one time, and that was based on it was really fun. That was based on which chip? Oh, it was a Schmidt trigger that we used for that one. Again, it's like quite a simple. Quite a simple little oscillator synth, but each person, like you could hear the difference between different people, the noises they would make when they were connected. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little boggled by that. The idea that the people have sounds. Okay, I'm getting over it.
Different violins have sounds, so why wouldn't people?
I'm not made of wood.
Sounds. Well, you're made of flesh, which
if I was made of wood, I'd be a witch.
Just as unpredictable.
All right, so moving along. So there are a couple of the projects in your upcoming book, the Crackle Box and the Jelly Bongos. How do you decide when to suggest people buy a kit like Makey versus build something entirely themselves, kind of like the Crackle Box, where you're really doing most of the work yourself?
My answer to that is that's up to them. I try and provide as many different approaches to making sound as possible. But the thing is, like, quite a lot of people, the reason I will use an established technology like Makey or like the microbit or an Arduino is because a lot of people have them already. Particularly in schools, or if you've got a family or whatever, people who are these are multi-purpose boards, right? So you're not going out and buying whatever the ordinary person's equivalent of a bomb is, like a shopping list. Like,
bill of materials.
Wow.
Bomb. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Just making sure.
Yeah, I mean, like what's the normal person's version of a bomb? All right, Helen. They already have it. So I'm trying to think of like interesting things they can do with the kit that they already have. And then there's different. So, for example, Makey is you take it out of the box as easy as accessible. Anybody can do something within like a couple of hours, easy peasy, right? Whereas the analog synth one, bare metal's a little bit more intimidating to a lot of people. And also the embroidery in that one takes absolutely ages. So it's a much more of an involved, that's like a rainy weekend's worth of work, stitching all those stitches. Whereas like the Makey is like a fun afternoon with your kids style make. So I try and make a balance. Like when I was coming up with all the different projects, I had like a big list of all the different things I was planning on doing, and I made sure there was a mixture of like analog and different microcontrollers and strange instruments and more conventional instruments, and I just made sure there was that balance there to try and show the breadth of technologies that you can use to start tinkering with sound.
How much do you think people will be able to look at something and change it? Like when I think about the Crackle Box, you listed the parts. I have most of those, or I can get them, but I'm not much into embroidery. So can I just use some copper tape, like from the Chibitronics kit?
Yeah, of course you can. I'm always into, I actually, not so much in the Crackle Box one, but in a bunch of my makes, I try and give ideas for how people can riff off of it. So for example, one of the projects I wrote up was my circuit sculpture creature, like the harp thing. I don't know if you've seen that. I'll send you a link to it on YouTube, and you could pop it in the show notes perhaps. And for that one, I use a particular sensor, the trill one that I said that I really like. But I give lots of different options for microcontrollers that they can use if they don't have the microcontroller that I'm using. so I think there's plenty of alternatives. I think my job is just to give a little inspiration, say how I did it, and then hopefully provide a base for other people to jump off of and do their own fun things.
When we talked to you before, we brought up the subversive guides for geography. Was that it?
Oh yeah. Back in the mists of time, I used to work in I work in a company. It's ridiculous. No, me and a group of my friends, we ran a very haphazard consultancy. Our work was very good, but we didn't know how to run a business. We used to make subversive educational materials to get kids doing critical thinking, learning outdoors, project-based learning stuff, slightly political stuff, slightly naughty stuff. That was really fun. That was like maybe 6 years of my life that I spent doing that. Before heading on out to do my own things. The name of the group back in the beginning was called the Guerrilla Geography Collective, and then later it became known as Mission Explore. So yeah, that was that. That was fun. Are
you subversively sneaking some music theory in with your sewing art and electronics?
Of course. There's lots of music theory, there's lots of craft, and there's lots of electronics. I don't like to make books that are pure electronics. I mean, so for example, in the Crafty Kids one, in each chapter, I would do like at least one electronic skill and or piece of knowledge, and at least one craft skill or piece of knowledge as well. And the same with the music book, although it's less. I've loosened up a little bit now, so I've allowed myself to just be a bit more playful rather than quite so structured with this one. But yeah, no, there's plenty of music theory in this book. I think tips for field recording, and I've actually put quite a lot more story in this one. So it's a slightly more journalistic parts to it as well. So I talk about. So, for example, in the Crackle Box one, I do talk about the origins of the Crackle Box and tell you a little bit about the instrument that I'm paying homage to. Or, for example, in the theremin one, again, I talk about the history of the theremin. And in each of the ones where I introduce a new microcontroller, I spend a little bit of time explaining what that microcontroller is and why I think it's kind of cool. So, yeah.
And so do you get across the idea of why you would choose a Makey versus a Teensy or an Arduino? Because those are all pretty different things.
Yeah, super different, actually. And you know what? I actually haven't. I haven't done like a compare and contrast. Like I've in each one where I use something new, I would say a little bit about that controller, but maybe I should write something up as part of an introduction, talking about like microcontroller selection and the differences between them. We'll see. Like that could be a good thing to add in, I suppose.
I think that's hard for a lot of beginners because they're given so many terms, and how do you even compare an Arduino with a Teensy if you don't know what all those terms mean?
Right.
It's true. Well, the Teensy's littler.
But far more powerful if you're talking about an Arduino Uno.
It is. But that depends. You know, this is where context is extremely important. So I have had lots of these conversations over the years, particularly with my students, when, you know, in telling them what an Arduino is versus what a Raspberry Pi is versus this versus that. And I think it can be extremely confusing. I actually, when people are starting out, I do often tell them to stay within one ecosystem. So whether they choose Raspberry Pi or whether they choose Arduino or whether they choose Teensy or, you know, the Adafruit ecosystem, I tell them to pick one and stick with it, certainly for the first year or so, or just as soon as they become comfortable with it. It just makes it easier for them, I think, to get a slightly better knowledge of what a microcontroller can do, and then just be aware that the knowledge that they gain using that microcontroller is absolutely transferable to something else.
I mean, just setting up the tools, that's not always transferable, but once you start being able to differentiate, oh, this is the microcontroller part and this is the tool part,
Totally.
you can pull that over to other ecosystems.
And stuff like sensors, right? Okay, maybe there might be slightly different things for different boards, but once you know how to use a DHT22 on a Arduino, you know what it does, right? You know what so like, when you have to get that knowledge, that hands-on knowledge of the different what sensors exist and are easy to work with and how they work. I actually think that's something that people have a lot of trouble with straight away, because they think that computers work like humans, like you can sense the thing that you can sense. But sometimes students have a lot of, do you know what I mean? Like it's like, well, they can't actually sense. It's like they have to understand how the sensor works in order to be able to work with it intelligently. And I think that takes a little bit of, but that's absolutely transferable knowledge. Like once you know how a sensor works on one platform, at least you've got a good run up at it on a different one,
I love inertial measurement units, and trying to explain accelerometers versus gyroscopes has been a good portion of my career.
Yeah.
When do you think your book will be out?
I should never ask an author that, Alicia. It's very rude.
Well, I just wanted to provide you motivation. So, you say February 1st, and then you'll feel horribly guilty until then.
Well, okay. So it was supposed to be out for Christmas, but I did immigration on hard mode this year. Immigrating during the Trump administration has been and during a pandemic has been challenging. I've got to give I've started a new job and I've immigrated and there's been a pandemic. So yes, I am slightly behind schedule. But I should finish it in the next, I'm hoping to finish it in the next month. And then of course it's got to be designed, edited, blah, blah, blah. But it'll be, I think I probably early next year, but not like in January, probably February or March. And the cool thing is, it's being serialized in HackSpace magazine, and it will be published by them too. So they are a Raspberry Pi organization. And because it's funded by Raspberry Pi, they're actually going to release the ebook for free, which is really awesome. And one of the reasons I was excited to accept the book commission actually was the fact that they're going to release the whole thing for free. So thank you, Raspberry Pi, even though there's only one Raspberry Pi project in the whole book.
Well, then you should have plenty of time to finish it. I mean, you just started a new full-time job, so it's not like that's going to cut into your time at all.
No, not at all. But luckily, having been a freelancer for nearly a decade, I can't remember what weekends are. So, I mean, like I'm hoping to spend my time feeling guilty about about writing on the weekends. So, yeah. No, I'm excited to, I think it'll be fine. It's actually mostly done. All the photography's done. All the projects are done. I've done about 60% of all the writing. So it's just writing up the last few things that I need to do. I need to cajole myself into. Yeah.
So let's talk about that full-time job.
Let's talk about my full-time job. Gosh, isn't that strange? It's such a sea change for me. I mean, I've only been in position 3 days, so I can't be too dramatic. But it's
by the time this airs, it'll be 4.
Yeah. So I recently started as head of community at CrowdSupply, my first job in a decade. Wow. But it's going super well. I didn't just take any job. I spent a long time thinking about who I'd like to work for before approaching anybody. And I really like CrowdSupply. I really like their ethics, and it's very much in my wheelhouse. It's open hardware, which is something I do a lot of and know a lot about. And I'm very much like embedded in that community. So it's basically a switch for me. Like, so over the last 10 years, basically, I've been paid for my creations, essentially, for like making things and then writing about them in different formats, or doing videos about it or whatever. And then I would do all my community stuff for free, like workshops, attending events, kind of keeping up to date on like open source hardware issues, blah, blah, blah. And I saw this as a kind of an opportunity to flip that on its head. And particularly because I was kind of, so the way quite a lot of people who make things verging on art feel, which is like, I'm not from a wealthy family. I've never had spare money. So I've always had to, the things that I make have had to also sing for their supper, right? Like I've had to be able to sell them into a magazine or whatever, which definitely has, since I've become a lot more competent at making things, it's definitely reduced the scope of the things that I make, because if I make something super complicated, I can't write about it anywhere. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so basically I was looking for a position where I could do my community stuff and for money, and then do my art for me, just because I felt that was the right stage of my life. As I say, I've been at CrowdSupply for a mighty 3 days, but I'm really excited about the kind of things I'm going to be doing. Do you know the Teardown Festival?
I've only heard of it a little bit, but please tell us more.
So the Teardown Festival is actually how I heard of CrowdSupply in the first place. It's like an open hardware festival. It's quite a small one. It's like kind of comparable to SuperCon, which is one of my faves. But it's so in size and in the kind of vibe generally. So it's very hackery. It's very friendly. It's not corporate at all. It's not like Embedded World where it's all booths and whatever. It's very much like an extended HackSpace kind of vibe to it, with like really interesting talks and workshops. And the Teardown one, it's like a really nice mixture of hardware and art, but also a lot of talks about ethics as well, which is something that's really interesting to me, like the ethics of hardware and the ethics of open technology, and just kind of like the philosophy behind open source as well. I think it's a really interesting field. So it was a really interesting festival, and I went there and I was like, this is really cool. I like the vibe, blah, 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 blah. And I talked to the team there and I was like, this is really cool. And they were like firmly on my map from that point forward. But yeah, so what I'll be doing is I'm going to be running that festival now. So the Teardown Festival, which will, once there are festivals again, we'll be running that. That's going to be super awesome. And I'm also going to be scouting for really cool hardware projects who want to work with us. So I guess I should explain what CrowdSupply is. With my mighty 3 days worth of knowledge, basically. So that they're a crowdfunding company. They're a crowdfunding company who do open source hardware, essentially. And it's very... they do have consumer products on there as well, but I would say that the vast majority of products that are on this on CrowdSupply are engineering focused, right? So you might go there and find an open source oscilloscope, or like a phone that's like for hackers, or an open source laptop, or these kind of things, right? So very kind of engineering, very like tech focused, and they're all like, so to get onto CrowdSupply, you have to be like ethical and open and all that kind of stuff. So you have to sign up to. In fact, I think they actually like reject like 90% of the people who apply. They have a very limited, focused range. I think they're a really cool company. I'm really happy to work there.
We heard a little bit about them from Ben Henke when he was on for talking about his Pixel Blaze version 3. It did seem like they put him through a fair number of hoops, but at the end, he and they were confident that he would be able to produce it.
Well, that's the thing as well. I think because we're like, everybody at CrowdSupply is like a total hardware nerd. Like we're all open hardware nerds. And we're not just like accepting everything, I think every single project that's been funded on CrowdSupply has been shipped, or is on course to be shipped. So basically, they are a lot more rigorous with investigating their technology than other like there's no one who's gone on there and done a scam, if you see what I mean. Yeah. It's not possible, you talk about that extensively during the process. It is a lot more involved and it is a lot more rigorous, but it's a really awesome community. And there's some really cool products that have come out of it.
Are there any areas of focus that CrowdSupply will be looking at in the hardware space in the coming few months?
So there's a really awesome product up at the moment by Bunnie Huang.
Yes.
Yes. So he's got a really cool phone up there at the moment, which is one that I've been really keeping an eye on. That's been my favorite one recently. In terms of like focus in the upcoming, so something I'd personally like to focus on a bit more is open science hardware. I think that's a really interesting field. But yeah, basically, I think open source hardware is a little bit less developed than open source software, like, in terms of like people being able to make a living from it. So that's something that I'm really interested in focusing on, being able to be able to provide with CrowdSupply, right? We want people to be making open source hardware in a respectful manner. And we want to be able to provide a way for those people to make a living. And like one of the cool things I think that I've come across at CrowdSupply is like, so they were bought by Mouser 2 years ago or so. So now all of the fulfillment is done by Mouser, which means, I don't know if you've ever shipped a product and hated doing the shipping process.
Yes, so much.
So basically Mouser just take care of all of that, all the VAT, all the customs, all the blah, blah, blah. So I think that's been a huge advantage. And we just want to be able to leverage that kind of big company distribution network for small indie open source hardware creators. And also you get like amazing, pricing and blah, 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 because of the whole Mouser situation. So that's pretty cool.
Feel free to pass on this question, but how do you think people will decide CrowdSupply versus Tindy? Do they work together or are they competing?
I wouldn't say that they were competing. I would say that, well, they've both got a Brit on their team, so there's me and Jasmine. I can't imagine competing with lovely Jasmine. I personally, there are different platforms for different things, and I think that's fine. And the Tindy thing is like a small shop. It's more like Etsy, right? And I would say like CrowdSupply has that crowdfund element to it, but also it's not strictly like Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is just like the crowdfunding, right? But CrowdSupply also has a shop afterwards, right? So it's like Kickstarter say like, oh, I'm not a shop, but CrowdSupply definitely is a shop. So you kind of, as soon after the campaign is successful, you get stocked by them, and if you're lucky, Mouser will stock you as well. So it's a bit different. It's a bit bigger scale than Tindy, I would say. So it's kind of so Tindy's more like small kits. Like I might have sold something on Tindy, but I've never done a product that would necessarily work at CrowdSupply yet.
So bigger scale, okay.
Yeah, bigger scale. And there's like a range. I should say there's like a range of people who put projects up on CrowdSupply, from people who just they're like, oh, I just want to build hardware. I don't have to think about any of this other stuff, like the distribution or the tax or the this, that, and the other, or like the messaging and the branding, that kind of stuff. But there's people who also come to us who've got all of that sorted, which is actually pretty nice to see. There's this big range of engineers out there, from the engineers who don't really know or care about all the branding and all that kind of stuff, all the way up to people who've got like a real vision for their open source hardware as well. So it's actually quite a privilege to get to see into the minds of all of these creators, and all of the exciting things that they're doing.
Let's see. I have a couple of listener questions, although I've asked most of them. Let's see. Andre from the Great White North wanted to know more about conductive thread. Does the coating wear off, and how long does it last for?
Well, that depends on the thread, doesn't it? You might as well have asked that about wires. And also, not all of them are coated. So there's a couple of different ways of creating conductive thread. So, for example, there's a copper brand, is called Carlgrim, which is fantastic. They do copper and silver, and those are literally thin strands of copper wound around a Kevlar core, which are fantastic. It looks beautiful, and there's no coating on them, obviously. But that's quite brittle. Or you get stuff that's woven in as well. So my current favorite conductive thread brand is from an embroidery thread company called Madeira, and it's wonderful. But it's wound in, so that's spun silver with ordinary thread as well. But I don't think any thread that I use is coated. It's usually like spun.
Okay. And does it last? Does it become brittle?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
Again, depends on the thread that you're using and how you're treating it. Of course, it's not the same as a plastic-coated wire. It doesn't have that longevity. I have not yet had a project fail on me because of the thread itself. Maybe the connections have become loose over time, or the knot is undone, or whatever. But I've personally never had the actual thread itself break. But then I do tend to use relatively decent quality stuff. So, yeah.
Before we let you go, though, you told us a little bit about this musical Tentacle, which
I need to know more about this.
Hugs you and purrs for you.
That's correct. Yes. What more do you need to know?
So,
does it also light up?
No, I'm actually not a fan of LEDs. I think they're tacky.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, but yeah.
Okay, cut to I'm getting cancelled.
So no.
by LED Twitter,
I have no
I'm being
particular
cancelled.
love for LEDs. So the Tentacle is. So first, is this destined for like performance? Like,
nah, mate. I just did it because I thought it was funny.
Snuggly.
It just seems like the sort of thing needs to be on stage.
It's been on stage, but just as like, not as a full performance. I gave a talk wearing it, well, partially at Congress last year.
Okay.
For those of your listeners that don't know, Congress is the giant German hacker festival that happens between Christmas and New Year's every year, and everybody should go once. It's fantastic fun. Have you been before?
No, I'm afraid of giant Germans.
You're afraid of giant Germans? Well, sometimes they're small too.
We said it was a giant German festival, so.
Oh, I see.
Sorry. It's the punchy time of the afternoon.
Yes.
Punchy.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So was it like, I guess it's talking about these things on audio just doesn't work that well. I'm going to have to go find it and look at it, I guess.
I'll send you a video so that you can put it in your show notes as well.
What was the genesis of it? Were you just sitting on the couch going, I wish I had a cat, but I can't have one here?
The genesis of the Tentacle was, so I was doing a residency at an art and tech institution in Denmark. And as part of it, I was making some studies of different creatures. And I started sewing a whole bunch of different sea creatures, just for experimental purposes. And then I made a tentacle and it looked quite pleasing. So I made a bigger tentacle and I discovered that I could cuddle it. So I made it again, but with conductive thread embroidered down the center of it. And I was like, I think I can do something with this. But I was on my way out of the door at that point because I was on, where was I going? Oh yeah, I went to LA for SuperCon. I took it with me. And so many hackers at SuperCon, I couldn't get it back, basically. Everybody loved it so much that I thought, well, I better put some sounds in this then. And I thought for a long time, I was like, I could, at that time, I just had called it a sensicle. And I thought for a long time, I was like, what can my sensicle do? Right. So I was like, I could make it whisper vague British reassurances like, you're not as bad as you think you are. Or
let's get a cup of tea.
Yeah. Or, don't worry, nobody else noticed. Or, like these like British platitudes I was thinking. And that's what I was thinking originally. And then, actually I started suffering from quite bad anxiety, after I got back from SuperCon. And I wanted something and I wanted then to, kind of riff off of the Tentacle. And I thought, because it's quite a comforting thing. And I was having quite a lot of mental health issues at the time. And the process of making itself was very calming. So I started making these tentacles, and then the sound that I would put into them was just the most calming, loving sound I could think of, which was a cat's purr. And that's the story of my tentacle. People liked it, and then I got depressed and made it purr.
There's an amazing number of stories that are, and then I got depressed, and suddenly it was awesome. As far as making things go.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things that I make are absolutely responses to my humanity, I guess, without sounding too art school about it. I make things that are, I make things that make me laugh or give me joy or comfort me. I'm quite an emotions-based maker, I think. But yeah, the Tentacle one especially. I bet you weren't expecting me to tell you about my depression, but yeah, I was pretty depressed last year, as in this past calendar year, as probably quite a lot of people were. And then the purring Tentacle was definitely part of that, and it actually helped quite a few other people as well, which was nice. But yeah, it was definitely part of that period of my life. I just needed that softness, that presence. I needed some comfort, Yeah, so that's what that's born out of.
I do know. I totally know.
Yeah.
Well, Helen, we have kept you as long as I think we can, given that we're on the same time zone now and it's time for dinner.
It is time for dinner.
Do you have any thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I would like everybody to know that all music is made up and all instruments are invented, so you should feel empowered to make as much ridiculous noise as you possibly want to. And also, if you are interested in making your hardware that you're playing with more widely available, you can message me on the old Twitter, or you can drop me an email. I'll leave my details with Alicia as well. So, yeah, make some noise.
Our guest has been Helen Leigh, Head of Community at CrowdSupply, author of The Crafty Kid's Guide to DIY Electronics, and an upcoming book on DIY music tech.
Thanks, Helen. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Thank you to Christopher for producing and co-hosting. Thank you to our Patreon listener Slack group for questions. And thank you for listening. Did I already say that?
It doesn't matter.
Don't think so.
You can always contact us at show@embedded.fm or hit the contact link on Embedded FM. And now a quote to leave you with. Truthfully, Helen's last bit was kind of the quote I was going to use. And she already said the part about the radiophonics workshop. So I think I'm just going to go with a quote from Helen taken out of context. Who knows where your tinkering will take you?